Hey everyone, I'm Nathan, and today is going to be a fun one because I get to draw some of my favorite comfort characters. So as you can tell from the title and the thumbnail, I'm going to be drawing the Super Sons from DC Comics. The Super Sons first appeared in 1973 in World's Finest Comics. Their most recent incarnation appeared in 2017. Basically, this comic is just about the son of Batman and the son of Superman getting into a bunch of preteen superhero hijinks. I loved this comic run, and I think it did a really good job at cementing John Kent as a character. John Kent is Superman's biological son with Lois Lane, and he's the most recent Superboy in the comics. There was a lot of hesitation at first. A lot of people had doubts if DC were going to be able to pull off John Kent as a character, but this comic, along with the Superman comic at the time, really cemented his character as being super likable. The chemistry between John and Damian is so good. They just have a really good dynamic because Damian obviously is more of the straight man of the comedic duo, whereas Superboy is more of the screwball. And John also doesn't take Damian too seriously, like he always pokes fun at him, and they're just always really fun to read together. Anyway, eventually the comic run came to an end, and DC made the decision to age up John Kent into a teenager in this really weird, convoluted way that I'm not going to get into now. And this caused a lot of issues for some readers. It just seemed so weird to take a newly debuted character that the reception was really positive for, like everyone really loved what DC was doing with it, and completely 180 change it and turn it on its head. But anyway, I've always hoped they're going to turn back the clock and age down Superboy. That way we can get more stories of him being a kid and being with Damian, and we actually can see the process of him growing up, and stories of maybe John Kent coming of age. Like, that would be a really cool comic that I would want to read or write and illustrate. Hire me. And I do have some hope that this will eventually happen. One being, we've seen John Kent age down more recently. There was a holiday anthology that came out, which had Damian and John going trick-or-treating. And then there's a new Super Sons movie, which side tangent stars Laura Bailey from Critical Role as Lois Lane and Travis Willingham as Superman. That really doesn't have to do with anything we're talking about today, but I just love Critical Role, so I thought I would mention it. So I'm holding out hope. I'm holding out hope that eventually DC will release more Super Sons material, and eventually we'll get to see a natural coming of age story. But I'll get into that more in the speed draw. So without further ado, let's get started. 3, 2, 1, go. Alright, so like I said before, John Kent and Jay Nakamura are kind of comfort characters to me. I really resonated with them as a couple, and it was just really nice as a gay person to see myself kind of reflected in a character as iconic as Superman or Superboy. So I really love them in theory, and I love them in my headcanons that I have for them. But DC made a really big mistake by introducing Jay Nakamura outside of the Super Sons run. So the way I would fix this is by doing a webtoon series. So DC already has a partnership with Webtoons, and they have some pretty incredible titles out already. The most famous one being the Bat Family comic. It is so good and so slice of life, but also having really good heartfelt moments at times. So I would do something similar. The fact that the Webtoons are officially published materials, so they do kind of exist in that world of canon, but they are these Elseworld-like stories, I think that's the ripest area to really tell a coming of age story. So I would do a Super Sons Webtoons, obviously centering around Damian and John and their friendship as kids and what it's like growing up. That way we can really see a friendship between John and Jay first before we ever see them in a romantic way. And this happens a lot with children's animation, like in Avatar: The Last Airbender. They didn't immediately rush into a romance between Aang and Katara. Like, that initial attraction was there, but the story really let them be kids. Same thing with like Steven Universe. I really loved how that whole series treated Steven and Connie's relationship and how it was just about friendship, but there is that dynamic of being a kid and having a crush. Like, we get to go through and see all of those things and emotions. So that's what I would like to see out of the series. And it's not the main focus, but it would be an element that's there. And I think the main story would really focus on those three characters, on Damian, John, and Jay. Because what happens when you introduce Jay Nakamura into their friendship at this young age? I think there's so much to explore in terms of like friends being jealous with each other, especially like the ages of being a kid and then becoming a preteen and then a teenager. I think the best way to describe how these stories would play out chapter to chapter in the webtoon would be looking at the 2003 Teen Titans animated series. The thing I loved about that initial run on the Teen Titans cartoon was that all of the stories really focused on the characters and who they were and what they were going through. Like with Starfire, what does it feel like when you think your friend's like your older sister more than you, or you feel like you're being replaced in your friend group? Or with Raven, when you feel like your friends don't understand you, or you feel like an outcast, or you don't know how to communicate your emotions. Or Robin, when you have like a perfectionist complex and you feel like you can't show your friends any of your weaknesses. Another one that I really loved was when Starfire went through the change, and it was kind of about puberty and how that can be so difficult to process when you're a kid and you don't know what's going on. I think those are the stories I would want to tell. Stories of kids being kids, but growing older, understanding responsibility in the world around them, like why do bad things happen, navigating first crushes, and also at the same time all this is going down, there are super villains running amok that you have to stop. So what will this comic look like? The way that I kind of imagine it working is we're following the two super sons as they kind of navigate life as superheroes, but also being kids. So obviously they're gonna have their little friend group, which I think is going to kind of make up our whole cast. We are gonna see the parents, Lois Clark, Talia al Ghul, and Batman, but it should mainly be the kids and their kind of wacky adventures and the social dynamics between them. So the speed draw is kind of like a pitch of what I think the art style of this comic would look like. It's very simplified and cartoony, and I think it matches the styles of the other webtoons comics. So the scenario that I've kind of put them in is I'd like to imagine that Batman and Superman are dealing with the actual big threat that's happening in the scene. Like we would open on both of them dealing with a pretty big villain, like it could be Lex Luthor or just a giant monster, and have both of them say, all right, we're handling the big bad thing, you're in charge of evacuation. Both John and Damian are just trying to do their jobs. So the idea behind this particular panel is that while they're trying to evacuate everyone, they haven't really figured out their groove as a team yet, especially because most of the time it's just John and Damian working together. They have worked with Sarah before. She's the girl with the red hair, so maybe they have a little bit more of a dynamic, but the newcomers Jay and Georgia are kind of on the outside of things. So this is kind of a like things are going wrong moment. The gag being Damian's just trying to swing like normal, but he accidentally runs into Jay. But since Jay's power is that, you know, things can phase through him, Damian actually knocks the cat that Jay is trying to save. And yeah, they don't know how to work together as a team yet. And I thought about originally making it like Jay was saving a baby, so it was a bit more heroic. I was like, that's probably a bit too violent having like a toddler or a person being kicked out of their hands, so a cat was just kind of funnier. So I guess I should explain who Georgia is, because she isn't a very prominent character in the comics. She really only appears one time. Her name is Georgia Bakshi, and there literally is no information about this character, so I've kind of built a whole lore in my head. The only time we see her, she's playing soccer at the same school that Damian and John go to, so I'm like, okay, she's kind of sporty. We really don't know anything about her, so I just kind of looked up the last name Bakshi, and I found out there was this really famous animator. So I was like, oh, maybe her father is this really famous animator, and through some wacky backstory, she has a power like that old animated show Chalk Zone. Like, what if the things that she draws become animated and come to life? And that's what her superpower is, and that's how she fights villains. So I gave her kind of a sporty look that's reminiscent of her playing soccer, and I gave her like a little pouch with chalk in it, and that's the chalk that she's holding in her hand. And these weird little creations behind her are the things that she's drawn and brought to life. And their weakness probably would be like water. So whenever they get wet, they dissolve. I just thought that would be kind of like a fun little thing to give her. And then the girl in the front, her name is Sarah Meyer. She actually does appear in the Super Sons comic, and she's really cool. Her brother is Reggie Meyer, or Kid Amazo, and they were a part of this like family of superheroes before her brother turned evil. And I just really loved her, and I love her brother, and that kind of gives in a built-in villain for all of the kids to fight that's also a kid. So yeah, definitely have to have her on the team. And she's kind of interesting because her power is she can control technology, or she can like talk to technology, which is why she has her headphones and her big mechanical gloves. So it's kind of interesting. It's almost like she's the cyborg of the group. So I thought that was kind of fun. I don't know if I would keep Georgia as a permanent member of the team, or if she would just kind of be in or out, but I feel like John, Damian, Jay, and Sarah are definitely need to be a part of this team. But that fifth spot probably needs to be filled by someone that's more of a Ravenish character to kind of fill that role. That way there was a character that was more magical based, so the door could be open for supernatural stories as well. Like, we already have a bunch of avenues for sci-fi because of John being an alien and Sarah having the ability to work with technology. I think having a more magical member would just help round out everything. I don't know if you can tell, but this was really fun to work on. My art style is really good at drawing children because I just love their big heads and gangly limbs. A lot of times people will ask me what's like a dream project that you would work on, and I think this is definitely one of them. Like, if I had to ever do something for DC Comics, I would love to do like a Super Sons webtoon. Oh my gosh. Even if I didn't draw if I just wrote it, or even if I didn't write it and I just drew it. Like, to be a part of that in any way would be amazing. It would really mean a lot to me because as a gay man, there are so many stories that I can tell with John and Jay. Just that perspective of growing up queer and not understanding yourself. And like, I really hate that we never got to see John fully come into his sexuality and like question it. Like, oh, what are these feelings that I'm having for my friend Jay? And how come it's so different when I hang out with Jay? I act differently than when I hang out with Damien. Why are these two friendships different? Why do I feel differently? I just think these are such interesting questions that we haven't seen a lot in media, and they would just help make both Jay Nakamura a fully three-dimensional character, and the same thing with John. I think with Jay Nakamura, he kind of is very flat right now in the comics, and there's just so much room for potential. Like, I just imagine him he's much more nerdy than the other two, and he's probably like very, very self-conscious because his two best friends are Robin and Superboy. Like, they're so famous and so cool, and Jay's like, I'm just a nerd. So I think he would really struggle with that, his insecurities and not feeling like he belongs on the team, and feeling like his power maybe isn't the most extravagant or brilliant or show-offish. I just think he's very ripe for telling those kinds of stories about being a kid and lacking confidence. Oh, I love doing this background. It was so fun, so pictury, so simple, so quick. Because honey, if we're doing a webtoon, we're gonna have to draw a lot of panels, so we're gonna need to have a shorthand for all of these great buildings. But I just love drawing the perspective of the shot. I love how we're looking up at all the kids. I love this car that John is lifting in the air, but I like to imagine that it's just full of a family, and John was like, everybody get in, all right, I'm just gonna move all of you at once, even though it's probably more dangerous having everyone in a car while you're moving them. Yeah, and then, oh, here's where I add the highlights, because the image wasn't quite reading that Damien was going through Jay, so just to really drive that point home, I added this kind of glowing effect, so that you can really tell that the boot is phasing through the body. And then I'm just adding a bunch of finishing highlights, and with that, I believe this is the finished image. And yeah, what are y'all's thoughts on the Super Sons? Do you guys feel like we missed out on seeing John grow up? How do you feel about Jay Nakamura? How do you think about any of my headcanons that I've talked about? And because Georgia isn't really an actual character in the comics, who do you think should take the 5th spot? But yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions down below. Or if maybe you completely disagree with me and you love John aged up and you think it's great, I'd love to hear that too. Go ahead and give this video a like and subscribe. And if you really enjoyed it, check me out on Patreon, link in the description. This has been real fun. I post every Wednesday and Saturday. I'll see you soon. Bye.